This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Finance Committee, and at the start of the meeting, I am joined by Councillor Noel from Ward 6, Councillor Gentile from Ward 4, Councillor Malachy from Ward 3, and Councillor Humphrey from Ward 5. We are going to go a bit out of order this evening. We are not going to start with the annual comprehensive financial report, and that's because Councillor Kalis, who is the chair of the Financial Audit Advisory Committee, is not able to join us till a little later. So we purposely talked about taking that up towards the end of the meeting in hopes that he'll be able to join us when that comes up. So that said, we are going to go to 126-23. Which is Her Honor the Mayor requesting authorization to appropriate and expend $1.15 million for the Franklin Elementary School. And I see that Commissioner Morse has joined us and is ready to kick us off with this item. Before he begins, I just want to note that we've also been joined by Councillor Oliver from Ward 1. Commissioner, thank you for coming, and please get us started.
Thank you very much. So pardon the casual attire. I'm currently on vacation. I didn't bring a dress shirt with me. But thank you very much for taking this item up tonight. For those of you who were either on public facilities or joined the other last week, I believe it was, this will be a little repetitive. And for those of you on the Franklin School Building Committee or who have served on building committees in the past, this may all sound very familiar. So you'll find in your backup that I provided a breakdown of not only the financials, very short breakdown, but also a narrative, a scope narrative as to what's included in the various elements of the feasibility phase and what these funds are used for. But ultimately, what we're doing is we're seeking the money to move through the feasibility phase for the project. This is very similar to what we did for Angel Reserve Cabot financially. It is in line with what other communities spend on feasibility phases. Our designer, HMFH Architects, was selected through the designer selection process using our designer selection committee, which has representatives that the city council appoints. They were highly recommended. We've worked with them in the past. They've done a lot of MSBA and non-MSBA school projects. We've been working with them for about a year now. We are currently out for solicitation for the owner's project manager. We anticipate we'll be working with the designer selection committee in May and getting them under contract in June. As I say, for most all projects, whenever I'm in asking for funds for feasibility phase, most any question that I get asked tonight, I would say that the answer is going to be found out during the feasibility phase. But that being said, I'm happy to answer any and all questions. I know it's a large sum of money, but this is par for the course, if you will. So with that, happy to answer anything anybody has.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to know we've been joined by Councillor Norton from Ward 2. Just one upfront question, Commissioner, which I know the answer to, but I want to make sure everybody else does. The source of this money is coming from the debt exclusion vote that we just had citywide, yes?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor. And I should say Councillor Laredo in Public Facilities asked that I clarify that as well. So for the record, the money is coming from the debt exclusion override. Thank you very much, voters. And it will be bonded. So this will be bonded money that pays for the feasibility phase.
Okay, thank you. Do we have questions or comments from members of the Finance Committee? Councillor Oliver.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Hey, Josh, how are you, sir? Real quick, the funding is going to eventually come from or will be bonded, right? But that hasn't happened yet. Is that accurate?
Perry might be able to confirm, but I don't believe we've sold bonds for Franklin yet. But ultimately it will be bonded, but we're not incurring those costs quite yet either. So
that is correct.
Mr. Rosenfield, yeah, do you want to just explain how that works?
Sure. So Ms. Lemieux may later shed some more light on this, but generally we go out to bond in January of each year. So because the vote has already happened, generally we wouldn't go out to bond until next year for these items.
Great. And then I guess I'll address this follow up to Mr. Rosenfield then. Is the So then in the interim, are those funds then used from another account and then put back into that account when the bonding happens? Is that how that works? Or are there no expenses, Commissioner Morris, until January?
So there definitely will be expenses. I see the comptroller has his hand up too. Go ahead, Steve.
Hey, thank you. So I just want to kind of explain this bond authorization. So when finance or the city council authorizes the city to bond, once that authorization happens, that means the city can then spend those funds in anticipation of getting that bond money later. As Perry mentioned, we usually bond in late January, early February. In the meantime, we don't hold funds necessarily. Each little account has its own real cash. We work at a pooled cash basis. So there's money in the city bank accounts to cover expenses for this Franklin School bond authorization in anticipation of this future debt service. At the end of the year, if there are expenses incurred before the bond happens, then there's just a bit of accounting that happens at the end to essentially the general fund lends the capital project fund money just for end of year accounting. And then it gets reversed back on July 1st. So.
Okay, fantastic. I appreciate that. That's kind of what I suspected, but I appreciate the help. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Do we have other comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion on this item?
I'll move it if nobody else does.
Counselor Maliki, motion to approve. Do we have further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that's a 7-0 vote. Commissioner, thank you for particularly joining us from your vacation. I'm sorry that you had to do that, but we really appreciate you being here, and I hope you have a really wonderful time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, everybody.
All right, take care. Have a good night. We're going to move on to 139-23, acceptance of equipment through the MassDOT Safe Routes to School program. Director Sobel, you're going to kick us off on this item. Is that right?
That's correct. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for coming.
Sure. So this was a MassDOT Safe Routes to School program grant where it was a competitive application process. We in the early stages, before we submitted the application, we reviewed it, all of the school zones that we have in the city, and both with our local volunteer Safe Routes to School folks, as well as with the school transportation steering committee or group. So based on those discussions, we decided to apply for the existing 20-mile-per-hour school zone on Lexington Street behind the Burr Elementary School. We chose that largely because there aren't any flashing signs there today. And just to be clear, what this grant is for, MassDOT is going to provide all of the equipment and materials for flashing 20-mile-per-hour school zone signs, as well as speed feedback signs posted on the same pole. And that's consistent with what we've done recently on some other school zones in the city. So with that, happy to take any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much. Do we have comments or questions on this item? I don't see any. One question that I have, what would you estimate the value of the equipment that we are getting to be?
Probably $10,000 to $12,000.
And obviously we're spending 5. So sort of
Correct.
spending 5 to leverage to get another 12, and obviously with a great end result of the equipment and the purpose.
That's correct.
Okay, I don't see any other comments or questions. Is there a motion on this item?
I'm happy to move it.
Motion to approve by Counselor Noel. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That is 7-0. Thank you very much, Director. Appreciate you joining. Have a good night.
Thank you all. I'll be sticking around for the next item as well.
Oh, you're going to do the next one. Great. Thank you. So the next item, 140-23, is authorization to enter into a 5-year contract with a parking enforcement services vendor. Do you want to start with this one? I know that Mr. Rosenfield is prepared to speak about it as well.
Sure, Perry, why don't you kick it off and happy to stay on for any questions.
Sure, thank you. So this item that Mr. Sobel will be speaking about, as well as the next item that Mr. Mendez will be speaking about, I just wanted to kind of set the stage. These two items, specifically what's in front of the council, is the authorization to enter into a 5-year contract. When it comes to the vendors that are selected or the process, Mr. Mendez and Mr. Sobel will certainly be able to answer that, but specifically tonight, we are looking for authorization to enter into the 5-year contract.
And just to be clear, Mr. Rosenfield, because I think we always need a reminder on this. The reason that it's before us is because of the term 5 years as opposed to 3 years. If you wanted
is
to go out for a 3-year contract, it wouldn't come to finance, but because it's beyond 3 years.
That is
it's to
correct.
us, and that's essentially why. The other thing I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood is that essentially this is out in the field right now. So the process is ongoing. Wherever the RFP process lands, it lands. But the question before us is a 5-year term as opposed to a 3-year term. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, great. Mr. Sobel.
Thank you, and thank you, Perry, for that explanation. So just a brief overview, the parking enforcement provider, the RFP has already been issued and the responses are due this Friday. But of course, we can't actually enter into any contract until City Council approves. This service provider, this vendor will provide services to 3 city departments, Newton Police, the Treasury Department, as well as DPW. And from a high level, the services that they provide are to Newton Police for the actual equipment and handheld devices to issue the tickets, parking tickets, and the services that they provide to the Treasury Department. And Ron, feel free to chime in if you want to add anything, but from a high level, all the payment processing, all of the coordination and interfacing with the RMV, and that whole aspect of it. And from a DPW perspective, we're certainly work closely with both Treasury and Police from a functionality perspective, making sure that our parking meters and the Passport app parking payment vendor interfaces with this enforcement provider. And the city's parking clerk, who reviews all parking ticket appeals, is also within DPW. So we're involved in that aspect as well.
Do you expect, Mr. Sobel, that it's possible you'll negotiate a 3-year contract with 2 1-year extensions or something like that? Or do you think that you're likely to go for a full 5-year commitment?
I think we'd be interested in a 5-year commitment. When this was last bid out in 2014, I wasn't involved with it at the time. It was before I was with the city. But it was with for a 5-year contract with an option to extend it another 5 years. The city didn't actually execute the second full 5-year extension, and we've been extending within that time frame on shorter periods. So we're actually only 9 years out from the original contract now. But it is a significant transition and process, both with our existing vendor as well as with any new vendor that we should select through this competitive RFP process. And given the extent of work on staff time and from our both existing vendor and future vendor, that's why we're looking for the longer contract term, because it is such an extensive process.
Okay, do we have comments or questions from the committee? Counselor Gentile, then Counselor Maliki.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What I'm going to raise, there really isn't anybody in the room to address this. I was hoping when I saw the word enforcement that there may be some high tech or software or drones or something that was going to be approved in this item that would help to actually enforce our parking ordinances. I would say that over the years, I have tried to be very supportive of the police department. Not try to be, I have been in many, many different ways. But this is one area that just continues to frustrate me to no end. As I sit here now, I can look out my window and see a 2-hour parking area across the street that has had the same cars parked in it for 2, 3, and 4 days. They haven't moved their student cars, and it's a constant problem. It's not the only one in this area. And quite frankly, I'm just sick and tired of having to call in all the time to have a very clear ordinance that's on the books actually enforced. None of those cars across the street have a ticket on them. So, oh, I got a little friend that showed up.
Oh.
What was I going to say? So what was I? The section across the street, which is right by LaSalle, I actually worked on it with David Kosis, the person from LaSalle, who was in charge of their grounds and so forth in the police department. And we changed the ordinance to free up parking over there because it had been totally restricted, and we felt that we ought to free it up a little bit more for residents of the neighborhood, folks that there used to be a child care program. It's been shut down for a couple years, but we wanted it to be available to parents dropping off kids or going in for appointments. And I felt that we were doing the right thing, and I still think that we did the right thing. But it's just turned into, when school is in session, it is 24/7 parked up by students. And the college isn't particularly helpful. They're not helpful at all. They say there really isn't anything they can do. So we have to rely on the police department to ticket. And ever since a captain, and I don't want to get into names, probably 3 or 4 captains of the traffic bureau was changed. He used to do a great job, and he used to get people out all the time, and they would follow up and enforce the parking restriction. Because what happens now is it comes out of the side street and comes out onto Aspen, which is my street, and gets parked up. So anyway, I don't understand how parking restrictions that couldn't be any clearer, why they are not enforced. Because I know that I'm not the only one that has this problem. I don't take it personally, because I know that there are many other sections in town that could probably make the same claim. Here, what happens is if I hound the police department, they will send somebody out, and for a day or two, the cars are cleared, but then they stop coming, the cars come back, and the problem persists. So again, I I don't expect anybody that's in the room tonight or on Zoom. It's not your job to actually issue the tickets. So, I mean, I'll vote for this item because we need to have a system in place, but I wish that we as a city, starting with the police department, would do a better job of enforcing the ordinances that we currently have on the books. So thanks for letting me vent, and maybe a message will get back. I don't know. But we just don't do the job the way that we're capable of, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gentile. I'll echo that we definitely have the same issues in Ward 7, certainly around the Boston College area, but elsewhere. Also, that's certainly something your ward and my ward share in common with the presence of the colleges and the surrounding parking issues. Before I go on to Councillor Malachy, Director Sobel, any insight as to whether this process might yield improvement in the technology for parking enforcement?
Well, certainly the goal of this this RFP is to have a system that works smoothly for the PCOs and for the police. You know, I can't speak to any sort of drone enforcement or anything like that, or the legality of that. But I will certainly, I'd be happy to relay the concerns to Captain Doucette in the Traffic Bureau of Newton Police.
Thank you. The drone enforcement point is interesting. That would open up a whole other can of worms. So pass along the messages you see fit, but that one might be a different wrinkle. Councilor Gentile, do you want to say more?
I figured I should throw something out there at least as an idea instead of just complaining.
Fair enough. I definitely take the point. Councillor Malachy, you're up.
Yeah, I think it's hard to fly drones over populated areas. Councillor Norton might remember something about drones. I was just curious on the sort of the experience on the last time, 9 years ago, whatever it was, which may not be applicable. And now, how many companies typically bid on this contract?
That's a great question. I don't know how many bids were received or proposals were submitted in 2014. That was a few years before I joined the city. But I do know from a general perspective that at least a few additional companies have entered this market space. A lot of the same companies that offer the mobile app payments, Passport is one, IPS provides our parking meters. I know they both now offer these enforcement services and may not have 9 years ago. So the bids haven't closed yet. I don't know who is going to be submitting proposals, but I think this the number of vendors potentially has expanded in the past 9 years.
And does the equipment or technology, does it include the sort of the license plate scanning technique where, you know, if it sees the same license plate in the same place, you know, 3 hours instead of when in the limit, it triggers something? Is that type of thing being used?
It's not being used currently, but it is an option for a provider. I don't think that there's an automated enforcement, but certainly to help keep track, especially in unmetered areas where there may be a 2-hour limit or 1 hour limit or whatever the regulation may be, helps the PCOs keep track of which vehicles were there.
So that's sort of included in their capability as part of this bid?
Yes, it's open to the RFP. Certainly allows for that sort of technology to be included in the proposals.
So you might have some bids that include it and some bids that don't?
Potentially, yes.
And then how do you, when you don't have sort of apples to apples, how do you pick?
Well, we have the base criteria that we've laid out in the RFP. And there was, I don't know, probably half a dozen base criteria, and the selection committee will be reviewing and rating each one as, favorable, unfavorable, and that sort of thing. And certainly if there's a specific technology that makes the work of the PCOs easier and more efficient, then that would be noted in and included in those evaluations.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Two more questions that popped into my head as I was listening to others speak. The first is, any idea if any of the equipment is capable of permit parking enforcement reading? I know we've got existing permit parking situations across the city, and it's obviously a brainstorm and an idea that's been floated in other contexts.
That aspect is not included in this RFP. We had conversations with the Traffic Bureau and Captain Doucette, and both Captain Doucette and Ron were instrumental in helping to put together this RFP. And the parking permits that we have, it's a fairly complex system to implement, because we do have so many different types of permits depending on what neighborhood in the city. So the decision by the police was to not include it in this RFP, and they may be pursuing a separate RFP or looking for a different vendor to provide those services.
Okay, got it. And then my final question was, is the team who's making the decision on this the group that's CC'd in the letter from Commissioner McGonigal in our packet?
Let me just double check who was CC'd on that.
Ms. Sullivan, yourself, Captain Doucette, and Mr. Mendez.
Yes, and perhaps someone from the mayor's office as well.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have other comments or questions on this item? Is there a motion on this?
I'll move it.
Motion to approve by Counselor Gentile. Any further discussion, comments, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, are you done for the night now, Mr. Sobel?
I am. Thank you
All right.
everyone for your time, and have a good evening.
I will reiterate my thanks. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thanks.
Okay, we are gonna go on to 138-23, authorization to enter into a 5-year contract. This concerns investment management services for the John C. Chafin Fund. Treasurer Mendez, were you going to introduce this?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
Hopefully
thank you very
can hear me.
much.
Okay, we can.
Yeah, we can hear you.
So this is a bid that has, the last time it's gone out was about 10 years ago. This is the investment management services for the John C. Chafin Education Fund, which is a scholarship fund for Newton High School graduates that was established through the will of John C. Chafin when he passed away many years ago. And the fund has approximately $6 million in it right now. And the trustees of the fund, which is a board appointed by the mayor, plus the school committee chairperson, serves as an ex officio. Mr. Cowden is here. He's the vice chair of the Chafin trustees here. Also, if there are any questions, the trustees can answer as well. But the Chafin Fund provides scholarships every year. They budget about 3 to 4% of their budget, and they give out approximately between $200,000 to $250,000 a year in scholarship of Newton High School graduates to help them with financing college education. So this fund has been around for many years. As I indicated, it started many years ago as approximately $170,000 and has over the many years grown to about $6 million. And every decade or so, we go out to bid for an investment manager. So and we typically request a long-term contract just because this is an investment portfolio that has a long-term outlook. And if we were to have to cash in the fund every 3 years because of the 3-year contract limitation, that would severely limit our, the trustees' ability to invest this long-term. And that's really the plan for this fund, is to make sure that we're growing this fund in the long term. So that is why we're here requesting this 5-year contract plus 2 3-year extensions. So that'll take us 11 years from now when this expires. And as I indicated, the last time this contract went out to bid was 10 years ago. And then before that, it was 10 years prior to that. So this is about a once a decade process that we go through. So I'm happy to answer any questions, as is Mr. Cowden, here, as I mentioned, from the.
Well, first of all, thank you, Treasurer Mendez and Mr. Cowden. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you for the work that you're doing on this fund. I mean, what a tremendous balance of the fund, given $170,000 start. My first question is, did that happen just through thoughtful investment management of the $170,000, or have there been additional contributions over time?
No, that's been investing it over the years. There really haven't been additional contributions. The fund has been around for, I'm guessing about 100 years, so it has been a long time. But
100 years.
So it has been a long time, but yeah, it has grown tremendously.
Wow. Well, that's great. Councilor Gentile, do you want to start us off with questions?
Thank you. So Ron answered my first question, was the assets on hand, which he said was 6,000.
6 million.
Excuse me, 6 million.
Sorry.
I would seem to remember at some discussion in the past that Wells Fargo was involved in managing the money. Is that true?
Not recently. Bob, do you have any recollection of Wells Fargo?
No, I have no recollection of Wells Fargo.
All right. Normally I would be concerned about authorizing what could be an 11-year contract, but if I read correctly, you folks have the authority to terminate the contract at any time if you think that that's warranted, right?
Yes, we
That's right.
retain that language in the contract and in the RFP so that while the investment manager is obliged to maintain the same fees structure and also beyond the account terminate if we see that their performance is impacted.
And how is the management firm, how do they end up getting compensated? Is it based on performance? Is it a flat fee?
It's not a flat fee. It's a percentage of assets, so it's based on performance. And we're fairly far through the RFP. You have a finalist that we are ready to award a contract to. Contract term is approved. So we're hopefully going to be signing a contract soon. And and up until now, there is going to be a change in the investment manager regardless, because the prior investment, the current, I should say, did not take part in the process. They had changes in their staff that they went in a different direction. So we are going to be changing no matter what. But up until now, it's been about 1% of the value of the fund has been the fees, and with this new RFP process, we expect that to go down to about 65 basis points. We're expecting in the new contract. That's what the lowest goal.
All right, so I don't know if everybody else broke up, Ron, but you broke up a little bit as far as what I could hear. So I might have missed something. So if I repeat something you already answered, that's the reason.
Okay, sorry.
No, that's all right. All right, so I was going to ask how the firm was going to be chosen, but it sounds like you've already been doing some work on this, and you have an idea of who you would like to hire.
Yes, we went through a fairly lengthy process. We started this RFP process back in September of last year, and we went through a question and answer session, a question and answer period, an extended one where potential proposers were able to ask questions about the fund and what the goals are, and we responded. And then once that process was over, we went through an interview process. So we interviewed all of the potential investment managers, and then we had them give us some scenarios to let us know what their proposed investment structure would be and what that would end up costing the fund. And then ultimately, the trustees ended up narrowing it down to a final that we're hoping to sign a contract.
So was there,
Go through an extensive process.
was there a committee that
There was.
working
There
with
was, the
you?
committee included myself. There were 3 members of the trustees, as well as the chairperson of the school.
All right, well, it's an outstanding asset that the city has. I would venture that nothing in the city, publicly or privately, has helped more kids in the city than the Chafin Fund has. I know my kids benefited, and so many other kids. It's something that's, you know, really within reach for, you know, even the quote average kids, of which I have several, and not all stars when it came to academics, but you know, they were able to benefit as so many other kids. So when the time is right, I would be happy to move this because I think that we're so lucky to have it. The person that originally set it up, the way it's managed, and Mr. Cowden, I hope you'll carry that message back, that we appreciate the work that you and the folks that you work with on the fund are doing. So thank you.
Thank you, I will.
I will consider that a motion to approve.
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Treasurer Mendez, if you could just repeat, because you did break up for 1 second. I heard you say that the rate that you think will come out of this process is 65 basis points. Is that right? And
Yes,
what was the
yeah, that
prior
would-
rate?
prior rate was 1%.
Was
100
1%.
basis.
Okay, got it. Do we have other questions, comments, or discussion on this particular item?
Could we, if it's not a lot of work, could we just get a short memo on, maybe since this last manager was there for like 9 years, just what the results were annually over that period, or is it that a lot of work?
No, we should be able to pull that. I actually have a spreadsheet with 7 of those years right in front of me, so.
Seven's fine.
Extend it to another 3 years.
7 is fine.
Okay.
Then I just want to get a sense of how it's been, you know, going. And, you know, I can't help but think this is something that hopefully we'll get to talk to Ron about when it comes to our fund that has 24 or 25 million dollars, because as you can see, there's there's potential there for us to really grow our rainy day fund and to help to take pressure off of our operating budget. And hopefully we'll be able to, you know, start talking about that soon. Thanks.
Mr. Mendez, do you want to email those 7 years and that performance, or do you want to put it up
Sure.
now and take a
I
look
can
at it?
I'll email them to the city clerk, and then she can send that out to everybody.
Sure, that would be great.
Okay.
Ron, what was 2022?
2022, I have fiscal years.
Okay.
2022 was actually the worst year, so that was, the market really went south.
I know.
there.
I mean, we know that from the retirement. I'm just,
But it went down about 17% that year,
okay.
and
Retirement,
that can happen. But the
retirement,
prior year went up 21%, so it all kind of balanced out.
retirement was down 11, but I don't think it's the same. I don't think it's the same year. You know what I mean? I don't think that they calculated the way
Yeah,
that.
they were on a calendar year. They do more of a calendar year basis.
Okay,
I understand.
thanks.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve from Counselor Gentile. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have 7-0 on that item. Thank you very much, Treasurer Mendez, Mr. Cowden, and to reiterate what Counselor Gentile said, we are appreciative and do hope that you'll carry that message back to your colleagues who work on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of you.
Have a good evening. Okay, we are going to go on to item 110-23. request to transfer $150,000 from law department full-time salaries. Ms. Lemieux, I know you joined us and wanted to speak to this item. Do you want to start this one off?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I actually do not see our city solicitor, Ali Giuliani, on here. So I may end up being the person who's answering any of your questions. But I would say, as you know, our colleague and good friend passed away very unexpectedly in June, Jeff Honig. In October. And he was doing so many different types of things. He was involved in so many different critical things in the law department that we have really needed to make sure that we hired a firm, because we haven't replaced him yet. We have hired a firm to do much of his work. We have had legal services money in the law department. We've had consulting money that we have been able to access. But what we're really here now for is to ask you to take the bulk of his salary is basically what we are looking to transfer to legal services, so that whether it's for the next 6 months or however long it takes us, so that we're able to have a firm working for us to accomplish much of what Jeff had been doing. And so it's with a bit of a heavy heart that I'm asking for this transfer.
We appreciate that. I know that he was a dear friend and colleague to many, including you. And it's obviously under deeply sad circumstances that we're discussing this. Councilor Gentile.
I wanted to point out one thing. This is a transfer, right, Maureen?
Correct.
Within the department.
Yes.
So I just want to point out that, make sure everybody's on the same page. In the letter from our city solicitor, the last sentence says, in order to cover these unexpected legal costs, I request additional funding be added to the law department's budget for legal services. So I don't think we're adding additional money. So you may just, it might have just been, semantics. But it does look as though, at least the way that was written, that Ms. Giuliani was looking for additional money above and beyond what was already, the bottom line.
So my apologies, we did not catch it when we saw the letter that she actually wrote. This is not additional funds. This is moving salary dollars to legal services.
And do you know if the firm that you've been using, Murphy, Hess, Toomey and Lehane, is that the same firm that we used when I was on the school committee years ago?
I don't know if the school committee did. I know it's not the same firm that the city had been using right before I came on. So I'm not quite sure who the school committee used.
Well, a long time ago, when I was on the school committee, the firm that we used to to represent us in negotiations and everything else, it did have a Murphy and it did have a Lehane. That was a long time ago. I'm just curious if it's the same firm. I'm more interested than anything else. It's not.
It could possibly be the attorney that we are working with, or at least that I've been working with mostly, is named Mike Macaro. And I can tell you, he's a lot younger than me. So he probably was not around, but his name is also Macaro. So he's not one of, at least not one of the founding partners. So I don't know. I know the city has used them for a few other things in the recent past. And, so far we've been using them, as I say, for negotiations. They're also looking at all of our collective bargaining agreements, many of which have not had a full integration of all of our MOAs that have been signed over the years. So we have several things that they are doing. And to be honest, I'm not sure if it's a different attorney doing that piece of it. The negotiations piece, I certainly work with that person.
No, the firm was great when I worked with them on the school committee. And as you know, the school committee gets a lot more involved in negotiations. And I think it's probably just, you know, the original founding partners, because that Murphy that I knew that worked with us, I don't think he'd be practicing right now. So it's probably just the same one, but with different folks. That's all.
Probably is.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Do we have further discussion, comments, or questions on this item? It's just one for me, Ms. Lemieux. So far with this particular law firm, you've obviously been working with them on a number of negotiations. Do you remain pleased with their services and confident that you're getting the representation that you need from them?
Thank you for asking that. I actually have been pleased. And so, you know, we are in the midst of a few different negotiations that they are involved with, and they have helped us close a few others. So I have been happy.
I'm glad to hear that. Do we have any further discussion or a motion on this item?
I'll move it.
Motion to approve by Counselor Gentile. Any further discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, so that's approved 7-0. Ms. Lemieux, are you going back to your other meeting now?
I was planning to, unless if you have any questions for me or need me for anything, I will
No,
stay.
so
Otherwise, I'm heading back.
our remaining item, we're now going to go to the annual report. And if things come up that we need you for, I will let you know. And if you're able to rejoin us at that time,
Thank you.
but we may
and
not,
certainly
so I'll keep
just
you posted.
text me if you need me.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to go back to our the first item on the agenda, 137-23. Unfortunately, I don't think we have Counselor Kalis yet, right? But I think we need to go on because we might not see him for over another hour. So with that, 137-23 is the comptroller transmitting the annual comprehensive financial report. So Mr. Curley, do you want to start in speaking about this? Or I see that Mr. Hunt is here as well, and I'm sure ready to present. Let me turn it over to you and tell me how you want to proceed, please.
Thank you, Chair. I believe Mr. Hunt was going to take this over. I will say that I think my first year in doing it, we finished it quicker than the last several years, and worked well with the auditors. We got the financials done late September. Got the ACFR done the end of December, and then worked with them for the single audit, which was largely the ARPA, and then worked on the management letter right around the same time as that. And it was an unmodified opinion, which is the best opinion that you can get. And I'm sure Matt can go in a lot more detail unless he needs me to talk.
Okay, Mr. Hunt, are you ready for us? Oh, your hand is up. Okay. So Ms. Giuliani, I see that you just joined us. We already took up and approved the last item on our agenda, requesting the transfer of funds
Oh, great.
for your
Yes, sorry.
department. So
I
you're welcome to
apologize.
stay, but no need if you
Okay.
if you have other things to do tonight.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was at another
Thank
meeting,
you.
came late.
No problem. Appreciate it. Just wanted to let you know so you weren't hanging out unnecessarily. Okay, Mr. Hunt, if you're ready, go ahead and speak. I see your hand, but not your video. Can anybody hear him? I can't.
No.
He's not muted, but
Mr. Curley, do you have his cell phone number or ability to communicate with him directly?
I have his email. I do not have his cell phone. Or his cell phone is likely in his email, so I could.
Yeah, why don't you look and see? I'm gonna check and see what I have for him. I think I have a work phone. All right, why don't you see if you can reach him? I'm gonna mute a second and see if I can reach him and make sure that we are on the same page here.
I do have his cell phone and his email. I'll give him a call.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, if anybody needs a break to get up and go do anything for any reason, I imagine we're gonna have a couple minute delay here.
This is when Alderman Salvucci used to tell a joke.
You got any good ones?
Oh, and plus they always, sometimes they could be a little off color, so we would cringe, but you gotta laugh.
You want to bring that puppy back on the screen, Counselor
Oh, yeah,
Gentile?
let's see. Puppy's getting bigger.
Yeah. She is.
So I just spoke to Matt. He said he is on and his audio is muted. He's going to try to call in because right now it's not working how he has set up. So I don't know if that will go over to whoever's in charge of letting people in this meeting.
That's me, Steve. I'll keep an eye out.
All right, thanks.
A special thanks to Miss Moore, by the way, for clerking this meeting tonight. Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
Is there a particular, Miss Moore, there must be a particular phone number to call into this meeting, right?
Yes, it's actually on our agenda. You can see it's.
Oh, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Curley, could you just make sure he text that to him and make sure he has it? See, it's that 646 number, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the meeting ID you need to
Right.
enter, right? I've never even noticed that before, but that is handy to know.
You will see a phone number as a participant, usually what will happen.
What are you doing? Come here. You want to come up? Come on. Come here.
I just texted that information to him.
Thank you. Maybe by the time we figure this out, Counselor Kalis will have joined us.
Believe
Anybody's, oh,
there's a phone number coming in.
just saw it. Mr. Hunt, are you here?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can. Awesome.
Okay, I apologize for that. I don't know how that happened.
So I assume, I know you usually have a presentation to put up on the screen. Is that the case this evening?
I wasn't necessarily planning on doing that. I wasn't necessarily told that there was going to be a presentation per se, formally. I
Okay.
mean, I can certainly go through some of the highlights, but I wasn't necessarily intending or wasn't told to pull up a presentation per se. But I
Got
can
it.
certainly go through some highlights.
I think going through some highlights would be very helpful. You normally are, you normally know exactly which ones to tell us about, and I think that would help to open up the conversation, any questions, and if you could, I would assume start with the annual comprehensive financial report and then go into the other two documents as well.
Sure.
That would be great.
Sure. Okay. So I will do that again. I apologize. I wasn't necessarily told to pull up a presentation, but I will try to keep it sort of to the highlights so that you can absorb sort of the key information. Again, ask questions if there are any. Keep in mind, you know, these reports are reviewed in detail with the Finance Audit Committee as well. So we do more of a detailed presentation for them as well. So really key highlights, I'd say, for the ACFR, really what stands out, the first thing we always like to talk about is your general fund. That's really the most important fund in the city's financials. It's the one that your bond rating agencies really look hard at as well. So looking at your general fund, as of FY22, overall fund balance was about 104 million. The real number we like to zone in on is the unassigned fund balance for the general fund. That's about $73 million as of June 30, 2022. That does include $24 million of your rainy day stabilization fund. One measure that we always point out every year that I think gives you an idea of what that unassigned fund balance is, always go with percentages, right? So from a percentage perspective, that represents about 14% of your annual revenues. So that's the highest percentage that unassigned fund balance has been in the past 6 years. So the reserves have been, city's done a great job of building up those general fund reserves over the years. In terms of other information in the financials that we like to point out, we always like to talk about your enterprise funds. All of your enterprise funds are in healthy financial position. Your sewer enterprise fund has $90 million net position, water enterprise 61 million, and your stormwater enterprise, a little newer, a little bit of a smaller operation, does have $9 million as well. Also within those same statements that you see your enterprise funds, you also have your internal service fund, which is your self-insured health insurance and workers' compensation. Those balances are also healthy at the end of the year. Total net position was 16 million. Overall, your net position in those self-insured funds represents about 2.5 months worth of claims. So I know the city's target is to be about 1.5 to 2 months worth of claims within their fund balance. So you're even over that particular target that you shot for in those funds. Couple other funds to point out, pension and OPEB, obviously some important funds to want to point out. Pension trust fund at the end of the year had about 526 million. This would have been December 31st, 2021. Change in net position, that was a very good year for the markets that saw the pension trust go up about $87 million based on investment income. Not so much the case the next year, but we'll get into that next year's audit. Your OPEB trust at the end of the year had about $25 million. Obviously, that OPEB trust is not anywhere near as close to being fully funded as pension. And I know the city's plan is to sort of address more tax the OPEB trust fund once the pension is fully funded. So speaking of pension and OPEB, just sort of want to talk about those liabilities. I think those would probably be the last sort of key financial highlights. Your OPEB liability at the end of the year was $667 million. That was actually a pretty large decrease from the previous year. What we've seen with OPEB liabilities is because interest rates have risen so much, the discount rate that you get on your OPEB liability is based on a 20-year municipal bond. So because interest rates have gone up, the interest rate on the OPEB liability has gone up, which has caused the liability to go down. Then when it comes with pension, the liability also went down for a little bit of a different reason. Because the investment markets did so well in 2021, that has a direct impact on your pension liability. So your pension liability went from 290 million to 245 million. So you continue to get closer to fully funding that particular liability. So I think I'd maybe best to try to pause there before going on to the other two reports and maybe see if people have questions about this particular report, or do you want me to just quickly summarize the other two as well?
Why don't you stop there? I know you triggered a few questions in my mind, I suspect perhaps for others as well. So just obviously to underscore the time period we're talking about, where you're talking about our market performance on the pension trust, et cetera. This obviously is not taking into account the subsequent downturn in the markets since this period of time. I mean, we're literally talking about being frozen in the period of time that this document covers, right? Just
Correct.
wanna.
Correct. So yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So when you were talking about the OPEB liability and how it's gone down a lot, you may not be aware that our mayor just made an announcement with respect to going out to bid and changing providers and a little bit of structural change with respect to the city's healthcare. Are you aware of it at all?
I was not necessarily, no.
Okay. So you may not be in a position to answer this question yet, but one of the questions that I have is, given that we expect that the cost to the city for our healthcare will go down, I have to imagine that that will also have the effect of reducing the size of the OPEB liability. Would that
In theory, yes. Like if you were to
directionally
look
sound
at
right?
it in a vacuum, yes. Like if no other factors were coming to play, obviously there's various factors that go into the liability. Assuming no other changes in any other factors, if you had a decrease in your healthcare costs, that would come into play when the actuary does their trend of healthcare costs and they sort of project out what your costs are. So yes, it would in a vacuum have a positive effect on your liability, i.e. make it go down.
Okay. And then one of my other questions for you, you referenced early on what the rating agencies look at. You were talking about the unassigned balance. I'm aware that the rating agencies, just from participating in the last call that we had with them, were looking for some of our different reserve numbers to be healthier and to continue to build them up. In your experience, is that one unassigned balance really the key number, or which other numbers in here with respect to reserves? Because I know it's not just the rainy day fund. I mean, we focus on that a lot as a city, but from their perspective, which other balances are they looking at?
Well, I mean, obviously the bond rating agencies, that they would be in a better position to give you more detail about what they look for. I'm not in that world, but for the limited amount of time that I've sort of spent being on calls like that, I mean, obviously general fund, they want to look at your enterprise funds as well. They want to make sure that those are self-sustaining. If there's any reason to believe that, the enterprise funds have to be heavily subsidized, they don't necessarily like that. So they'll look at those balances. They do care about pension and OPEB, but are aware of the fact that, OPEB is somewhat new in terms of people being concerned about funding it, et cetera. So it's really general fund, enterprise funds. But in terms of other factors, there's obviously things that they look at that go way beyond numbers that you would even see in a financial statement per se. They're looking at tax factors and your ability to tax, et cetera. So those are things that we don't necessarily cover in an audit. But those are some of the things that I'm aware of that they look at.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gentile.
Matt, picking up on what the chair was just talking about, you went pretty quickly through the cash. What is that line item specifically called? Is it unassigned cash balance, or is it what did you refer to it as?
Yes, I will give Pedro. I have the financials in front of me. If people have them electronically. If you were to look at page 18 of your financial statements, which from a PDF perspective would be page 34, it's your governmental funds balance sheet. And so you'll see your governmental funds balance sheet. It has the column for the general fund. And then towards the bottom, there's a section called fund balances. And that's where you'll see the unassigned fund balance number. It's about 73 million.
And what was the figure that was over 100 million?
That was your total fund balance. So in the same section, the total fund balance of all the different categories comes to 103, a little over 103.
And it goes down to, you said what, 74?
73 million is your unassigned number.
Okay, and the difference is,
You have various restricted and committed amounts. The majority of those would be unspent budget amounts from the previous year that are being carried forward into the following year. That's
So
the
it-
majority of what makes up the difference.
so it's money that we're obligated for, so
Correct,
really
correct.
the net number, the 73 million is the more important number.
Correct. Right. Those are the unobligated funds. There's no restrictions on those monies at all.
And you said that that represents 14% of our general revenue, or?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And that's the highest that it's been in
In
6
6
years?
years.
Okay,
Yeah. And I can give you also on that, it's a nice piece of the report. I can give you a page number reference where it gives you a history of the general fund balance and where I'm coming up with that. So if you go page 9 of your financials, which would be page 24 of your PDF, gives you a nice history of your general fund balance, both in total and by component over the past several years. And you'll see that that particular percentage is the highest it's been during that time.
so, all right, and then you went through all of our other reserves, and I don't know, it sounds to me like they're as strong, if not stronger than they've ever been, and that we're in great shape. So we don't have to get into this tonight, Madam Chair, but I'd be curious as to what issues the rating agency has, because from what I just heard from our auditor, we couldn't be in a better financial position, or at least we haven't been in a better financial position. When you talk about, needing 1 to 1.5 months of reserves in our healthcare fund, and we have 2 or 2.5, and then our enterprise funds, I mean, we have huge balances in those. So I don't know why they would be concerned about our reserves. It just doesn't make sense. But anyway, we can talk about it maybe some other time. That's
Fair
all.
enough. Okay, thank you. Do we have other questions and comments for Mr. Hunt on this particular report? Any of the numbers that he's highlighted for us so far? Okay, I don't see any other hands. So Mr. Hunt, why don't you go on?
Okay. All right. So the last two reports, we can go through the last two fairly quickly and then open it up for questions. Your single audit report, like Mr. Curley mentioned, that is the report where we do specific audit testing on some of your federal grants. And so this year we had to audit the ARPA grant and also the Medicaid grant for special education. Those grants had no findings. So that's certainly something the city should be proud of, especially the ARPA grant with all the scrutiny on that grant. So certainly something the city should be proud of, no findings there. And then when it comes to the mandate letter, quite a few comments from previous years have been resolved. That sometimes is the case. It just takes some time. So there's really, at this point, only a few mandate letter comments in the mandate letter. A couple of them are carry forwards from the previous year related to integrating the general ledger for police details. I know that process is in motion or is going to be in motion soon. There's also some IT comments related to information technology. We do every year put some IT specialists on the audit to just take a look at some high level things related to IT. So some comments there. And then sort of a new comment for FY22. One thing that we do is the Finance Audit Committee has us do some special projects every year, maybe do a little bit of a deeper dive into something that maybe wouldn't necessarily on its own get a ton of audit attention. So this year we had to do a little project on a housing utility relief program that the city ran during COVID. And without getting into the sort of details of the comment, it's pretty straightforward. There were just a couple of minor things that we came across in reference to that program, all things considered, given the volume of dollars that came in and out of that housing utility relief program. The findings we came across were pretty, what I would call benign. So that's really sort of a summary of the single audit and the management letter, and certainly can open it up for questions on those reports.
One question that I'll direct to Mr. Rosenfield. I understand that with respect to the IT comment, that there was a suggestion of perhaps hiring a consultant to come in and help with this particular, issue of what was highlighted in the letter, and that the administration didn't have a problem finding some small amounts of funds to deal with that. Mr. Rosenfield, are you in a position to speak to that?
I am not, but Miss Lemieux, I believe, is here as well. She may be
Oh,
able to.
Ms. Lemieux, are you able to join us right now? I'm going to send her a quick note. And my understanding is with respect to the police detail issue, that for the last few years running, the administration has represented that once we got on Munis, this would be a piece to come and fall into place, but we're still not there yet. Is that accurate?
Yes, and I believe that Mr. Mendez is working with the police department to try to set up a process there.
I can add to that if you'd like a little bit.
Sure.
So after Munis got up and running, we started implementing the more, I guess, easy general billing. Some of the fines, the direct billing for the healthcare that goes through HR. Oh, Mr. Mendez just showed up. The trash can or one of those trash bin programs. So it started off with those more general things, and then the new IT director within police has been working on getting the payroll portion up and running with, I believe it's a new software. And then once that's done, be able to link that over to Munis and hopefully get the general billing tied to their overtime detail software. I think I pretty much covered it.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez, did you want to add anything?
You did a good job covering it, so I don't think I have anything more to add.
Okay, thank you. I did just quickly text Ms. Lemieux and ask if she could quickly join to speak to the IT risk assessment piece. Councilor Gentile, your hand is still up. Did you have a question on this?
No, I'm all set. Thank you. I'll take it down.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, I don't see Ms. Lemieux. I know she's in the middle of the school committee meeting and important discussions that they're having over there tonight. In speaking to her earlier today with respect to the IT risk assessment piece, she did mention to me that the administration had no problem putting a small amount of money to work to address this comment, but I can't provide more details than that at this time. I'm sure Ms. Lemieux can when she joins us. Are there any other comments or questions on these documents, this process? Oh, okay. So here's Ms. Lemieux said she cannot join right now. She said the money needed is $25,000 as she understands it. She's not yet made a decision of where she will take it from. Okay, any other discussion on this? Anything from Mr. Hunt? Mr. Hunt, anything else that is key for us to know?
No, I'd say 30,000 foot view, right? I mean, again, the bond rating agencies, it's not necessarily my world. Okay. So keep in mind that if they have other considerations, that's sort of their world, not mine. But I'd say 30,000 foot view. You have an unmodified opinion, you have good reserves, you have a clean single audit, and your management letter is certainly manageable in terms of being able to implement some of the recommendations. So I'd say overall, everything considered, I think it's a solid audit for the city.
Thank you. And did you find, out of curiosity, was your team's work smoother as a result of our Munis implementation, or how did that go?
Yeah, I
know
mean,
you've
that-
been sort of actively involved in that piece behind the scenes.
Sure. I mean, it's been a couple of years now. Obviously, it's a process. It takes several years to get it fully implemented. We have found, and also, Mr. Curley has done a great job as well, sort of taking on the lead role for the city in the audit. That has also been very beneficial. Mr. Curley gets very involved in some of the technical aspects of the audit, which is very helpful. So no, I'd say, I echo Mr. Curley's commentary that I felt the audit went well this year.
Hey, Mr. Curley, anything else to add?
No, thank you, Matt, and your team, as always.
Yes, thank you. And I apologize for my technical snafus tonight.
That's okay. We can hear you loudly and clearly
Good.
now. So thank you.
Good.
Okay,
great.
do we have a motion on this item?
What is the motion supposed to be on this?
I think it's a motion to accept these documents, or a motion to approve, essentially, which gives formal acceptance by us and the council of these reports. It's always what we've done in the past. I mean, if we didn't accept them, I don't exactly know what would happen, but it's for our review and acceptance.
I will move to accept them.
Motion to accept by Counselor Maliki. Any other discussion before we vote? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Opposition. Any abstentions? Okay, so that's approved 7-0. Mr. Hunt, thank you again for your work, your team's work. Mr. Curley, thank you for your work. I know it's a large undertaking each year. I think it's great that we've moved in the direction of tightening up our timeline and moving it forward. And I look forward to continuing to be able to do that in the coming years as, as you continue to settle in to your role and with your team. So thank you very much. I think that's all we've got, Ms. Moore, right? I didn't miss anything. Okay, great. In that case,
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. We are adjourned. Thank you.